Blog Talk Radio.
Paranormal Review Radio.
Hello and welcome to Paranormal Review Radio, the only paranormal show on Blog Talk Radio that discusses a variety of topics with facts, opinions, and fun without any commercial interruptions. We don't claim to be experts in the field, but rather everyday people who want to learn and express everything paranormal. We bring you theories on both sides of the topic and let you, yes, you, the listener, make up your own minds. My name is Anthony Agati, broadcasting from New York City, and my co-host from Chicago is Lucy Leefried. Lucy, why don't you say hello to our listeners and give them some info?
Hi, Anthony. Hi, everyone. We have a great show for you tonight. Our phone lines are open, so give us a call. Our show number is 661-244-9831. You're going to need that number tonight. The phone lines are open for the entire show, so join the conversation. If you don't feel like calling in, our chat room is open, so post your comments, questions, or feel free to discuss with other members. Don't forget, we have a Facebook page, Paranormal Review Radio. Stop by and visit to learn more about tonight's show. Anthony, please introduce tonight's show.
Thanks, Lucy. Tonight's show is all about Bigfoot. No small feat here. Many of you may not be aware, but the theory behind Bigfoot, a.k.a. Sasquatch and Yeti, is not just a current-day myth. This hairy, ugly beast has been around for thousands of years in history. Tonight, Lucy and I will reveal the findings we found that date back 4,000 years. It may surprise you. Also, we've done some extensive research on one of the most Bigfoot cases in history, the Patterson film from 1967. This piece of work has been in the forefront of the paranormal media blitz for over 40 years. But is it a hoax? We'll present the evidence we found in our theories and let you be the judge. There has also been a recent piece of photographic evidence out in Pennsylvania in 2007 that has given the Patterson film a run for top controversial evidence on Bigfoot. Lucy and I will review this new piece of evidence and post the pictures on our Facebook page so that you can actually review along with us tonight. In addition to all the educational information we will present, I thought it may be interesting to discuss how the Bigfoot phenomenon has influenced pop culture and the entertainment media. Finally, we will also end with the show with some sort of global paranormal news and highlight some fellow paranormal groups and teams. We have a very interesting show for you tonight, so for all you Harry and the Hendersons fans out there, enjoy. But before we get into all this, we have a very special guest on the show tonight. When you think of Bigfoot, you think of that 1967 Patterson film, which was recorded by Roger Patterson and Robert Gillen. One man who has devoted almost his entire life to researching and investigating this piece of evidence is none other than Mr. Jeff Hilling. Jeff is a Bigfoot historian and researcher and one of the top experts on the Patterson film and has extensive research on the topic of Bigfoot. Mr. Hilling has written a book entitled The Great Bigfoot Film Mystery, which expertly details the history, the film, and the star of the show, Bigfoot. Mr. Hilling has been on various talk radio shows like Darkness Radio with Dave Schrader and 30-Odd Minutes with Jeff Belanger. When you want to know the real facts about the Patterson film, Jeff Hilling is the man you go to. Welcome to the show, Jeff. How are you this evening?
I'm doing great. Thank you for such a marvelous introduction, and thanks for the invite.
Oh, great. We're privileged and happy to have you on the show tonight, and I think our listeners and fans are too as well. And when Lucy and I started to do the research on this, quickly your name came up, and your website, pattersonfilm.com, came up, and we found it really interesting the information that you had on there, and we actually went and listened to a bunch of your previous radio interviews and just we just found everything that you encompassed as far as that film itself really interesting. So when did the interest in Bigfoot, and specifically the Patterson film, become sort of like a reality for you?
Well, it was a reality from my earliest days of remembrance, actually, seeing it plastered across the television on shows like In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy and other various documentaries and docudramas at the time, back in the early to mid-'70s. That's really the beginning of it. That's really when it started to take shape in our pop culture. Obviously, it was filmed in late '67. However, it really didn't gain steam and legs into the American culture until about '73, '74, really. That's when it really started to pick up steam and become sort of a household type of thing. People started remembering this image of this hairy man beast roaming through the wilderness of Northern California in such an iconic way.
So was the Patterson film the one thing that sort of sparked the interest, or were you interested in the Bigfoot phenomenon before that?
Well, it was pretty much that, and then, you know, as years gone on, you know, you hear about Bigfoot stories. I'm always interested in listening to something like that. From the time I have ever had an interest in Bigfoot. So you hear these things, and you gather interest, and you look at the stories, and throughout the years, and unfortunately not much has really transpired since then when you really look at the actual what do we have as far as actual evidence. Now there's a lot of alleged sightings. There's a lot of alleged footprints taking, almost endless amounts seemingly. But the funny thing is, nothing's really held up. Nothing's really captivated people's interest for over 4 decades, such as this film itself has. And
nothing is pretty much as the caliber as that film, and you have to also take into account the year 1967. So, Jeff, take us back to October 1967. Who was Roger Patterson and Robert Gimlin, and how did actually they come to film the alleged Bigfoot?
Well, they're pretty much average people. They were in the rodeo industry, horse ranching type of people. In 1966, Roger Patterson wrote a book called Do Abominable Snowmen of America Exist? And it was a groundbreaking piece of work, and it was a self-published effort. And it wasn't until '67 he decided to try to make a documentary about Bigfoot, or looking for Bigfoot, because he had gone on various expeditions and various places and found some evidence here and there, and was, I believe, convinced wholeheartedly that this creature really existed. And in the autumn of '67, Roger and Bob went on a camping expedition in the wilderness of Northern California, the Bluff Creek area to be exact. And it was about 30 miles in from a road, and when they captured what allegedly is this unknown creature that we see in the film. It was about less than a minute's worth of work, film work on there, till the film ran out. But it was an interesting format it was filmed on. It was filmed on 16-millimeter film. And that gives us the blessing of not only minutes worth of film, but it also gives us 952 individual pieces of film to look at, individual frames, which can be analyzed, and they have been to a great degree. And so basically he went to film the creature, or at least film himself looking for it and film his exploits. And that's what he claims. He went to his deathbed believing and claiming that this was an actual unknown creature. And he died very young, 1972, I mean, quite a long time ago, but Bob Gimlin is still alive, and he still holds that and maintains that the story is indeed true, which is fairly interesting.
I've read somewhere that on the very first day of their expedition at Bluff Creek, that they found a footprint, and the series of rumors that are going around how lucky he was to find a footprint and then they actually film Bigfoot. Do you see that? I mean, I don't know in your extensive research if you found that to be true, that they actually did find a footprint on their first day?
Yeah, I've read that different articles, and some of them had made mention of it, but not a lot of detail about that. And also in the interviews that have taken place, I've done research on that, and it wasn't a real prominent piece of part of the story, if you will. I did hear about it mentioned at least in one interview.
And Patterson never admitted to that or proclaimed it to be, or Gimlin for that matter?
No.
No.
The film is the interesting thing I'll tell you about this film is there are so many side stories about it and so many red herrings that you can go down when you're doing research in this film. And some of them have some validity, and I've listened to every single perspective on this film, no matter who's talking about it. And I find that a lot of the skeptics of this film are no longer dealing with the film itself, but they seem to be more interested in, well, was he really there on this day? How could he have gotten the film developed in 3 days? A lot of, he was a kind of a crook. He owed people money. He didn't get the camera back on time. These are the kind of arguments I'm hearing out of the skeptics camp, and have been for quite some time. And they've really stopped dealing with the most important part of this mystery, which is the film itself.
Right.
Why are we seeing such unusual things, unusual traits in something that is supposedly a man in a suit? It takes on a creaturely form almost to the level of paranormal, as if a person got into a suit for a minute of time and transformed themselves into an unknown creature, These are things that they can't explain, so they tend to go down different rabbit trails of endless stories. Well, my book, The Great Bigfoot Film Mystery, takes a little more laser approach to it. It doesn't deal with all these side issues because they tend to go nowhere and not deal with the real matter. This deals with a little deeper end of the mystery, the film itself.
Right. You attack the facts. You get to the point. You don't go around the bush, and you really don't go into the pictures and everything like that. You get into the case itself, basically.
Right. And the reason I didn't is because a lot of this stuff has been done to death. You can buy books on Bigfoot and the Patterson film, and they go into the charts and the diagrams, and that's all good and useful information. And I find even the skeptical information to be useful to a certain degree when I was doing my research. However, they still don't offer us everything, and this book takes a little different approach. It takes a very thought-provoking approach to the whole mystery, a holistic approach, and lets the reader decide for themselves which do you believe to be true. It actually takes a two-pronged approach. It explores the avenue of what if this was just a man in the suit. What would it take for Roger Patterson, an average rodeo rider with no known experience in cryptid costumery, to create something so believable that would fool people for generations?
Right.
And it also takes the approach is what if this was a Bigfoot? What is the likelihood of that? And perhaps was this the last Bigfoot ever known that was actually real? We don't know. But I look at both sides of the facts, and it is some of the facts I think you'll find startling.
I mean, and that's great. Everybody should go out and get your book, The Great Bigfoot Film Mystery. I think it is, you basically eloquently just said it. You get to the point. You don't dilly-dally with these rumor stories. You weigh the options, you weigh the facts, you weigh the evidence. You get into the heart of the film itself, because that's where the evidence is, not surrounding it. It's what's being portrayed, what's being showed to us. And I commend you on that effort and putting this book forward, because I know that there are hundreds of other books out there that really, to me, is sort of like a fluff. it really doesn't get to what you're looking for, why you're buying that book. This book gets to it, The Great Bigfoot Film Mystery. But for those of our listeners who have not seen the Patterson film yet, you can go to Google or YouTube or even go to pattersonfilm.com and watch for yourself, and you'll understand why I'm going to ask Jeff this next question. So, Jeff, why do you think this alleged Bigfoot does not react in any way to the surroundings, like seeing Roger and Bob standing there, or even the horses that they had with them? To me, it seems as though this thing is just strolling like nothing. Is there any way that you can explain this, or have you explained this?
Well, when you think about it, assuming let's take the approach that this is a real creature, and it's, why is it just kind of lumbering gracefully through the woods and kind of just casually walking away? Well, probably because the thing, if it is real, is 400 or 500 pounds, and it doesn't really feel that threatened. It might just want to kind of get out of there and not necessarily have to bolt like a squirrel. But you see animals out in the wild too where they'll do that too. If you certain animals that are just not too terribly afraid, they want to leave the area, but they're not going at full speed. They're not terrified.
Right.
So that could be one potential reason, which I think is a pretty valid reason. The thing also wasn't that near. When we see it on TV, especially today, the image is magnified several times. Now, when you used to watch the old footage that they would show on TV back in the 70s, it wasn't nearly as magnified. And the creature itself wasn't 20 feet away. It was about 100 yards away, roughly. So it wasn't as close as it looks. And
also due to the constant copying of the original film, the quality of the film itself is sort of had a degradation to it over the years, and so you're not getting the initial original quality that you had from that 1967 film.
Yeah, there have been some recent developments in the closer to the original film taken from Bill Munns. He got the one from Mrs. Patterson, Roger's widow, who had it in a bank vault. She keeps it in a bank vault, and he got to digitize that thing frame by frame on a very high resolution piece of equipment, which is awesome. So yeah, up until then though, we've been seeing a lot of really, really bad versions up until quite recently. A lot of the newer documentaries will actually have a pretty good resolution of it on their shows. But yeah, it's been copied a few times, and also when you see the prints, even the prints and the negatives taken from that film, some of them are just horrible,
yeah, right.
And they've been copied over and over as well.
You just mentioned Bill Munns. Do you agree with, and I took this out when I did research on him, one of the key points that he made was the proportion of the human body appendages to that of the Bigfoot that is on that 1967 film, and how it is disproportioned to that of a human. So it sort of negates, or he's proving the negation of the idea of somebody in a costume. Do you feel 100% in correlation with his views on that, or do you have some sort of side view of it?
I honestly like the work he's done. I think he's does an amazingly scientific, very logical, no-nonsense approach on this thing. Whether or not all his mathematics are correct, because he's also trying to figure out the formula of how big this creature was, based upon the distance and the camera lens and the everything. It's trying to determine the size of this creature, because it's very hard to get a perspective of how big this creature was, just based on visually looking at it. Because he's out in the open with fallen logs, and there's trees in the distance. Some of them are pretty huge trees, and it's very different than if he were standing up against something we could get a perspective on. If you were standing by a house or something like that, we would know how big it was. But he's doing some measurements on it, and I'm not sure if he's gotten his math together on it. But overall, I'm very, I think very highly of what he's doing and done.
Some of the theories on the height were either it was I believe it was within the range, or either
yeah,
it was
7.5 feet
depending
tall
on
or
it, it was like
4.5 feet tall or something like that. It was,
right.
It was, so we either had a very short man in the suit. Somebody wrote me the other day on my website, pattersonfilm.com, and they asked me. They said, "Do you think this thing could have been really small? Do you think this thing could have been possibly a child in a suit using the concept of forced perspective, which is it's an old Hollywood studio trick to take something small and it actually kind of messes with your mind, and it makes it look in an unreasonably large way when you don't have anything to compare it to if it's done correctly." It was a very interesting theory. I don't think that's what was done because it for many reasons, but it was a very interesting concept. And it just shows, too, how we can't really get a really good feel for how big this creature was. Although just by looking at it, I would say it's far too big. And even with a forced perspective illusion going on, I don't think that's what we're seeing here. And I don't think that somebody would have even thought of that, because that wasn't something that would have been common knowledge with somebody, particularly who's not a Hollywood filmmaker, a costume maker, that sort of thing.
So there have been, of course, the naysayers out there that say this is a hoax. It is not Bigfoot. What would be the reason if it was, or could you say what would be the reason that Roger and Bob would do this? I mean, other than either the fame or the money, which I don't know if they've gotten either, other than having their name on this for the past 40 years. But I mean, to me, I believe that this film could be the epitome of what Bigfoot would be, and possibly was captured on film. But I'm not so sure the naysayers are convincing me of the hoax, and I don't know if you have anything to sort of combat that theory on it.
To combat the people who think it's a hoax? Well, here's the deal. If it was a hoax, why don't we see dozens and dozens of pieces of mysterious Bigfoot footage that are mystifying people for years and years and years? We should, if it were that easy, just to put a man in a fur costume and get him to walk out in the open for a minute, we should have all kinds of bogus footage out there that is just dumbfounding people. Because, let's face it, there are lots of pieces of fake Bigfoot footage out there. Tons of it.
Right.
But we don't see any other film that is perplexing people, nor do we see any other piece of film that is as good of quality as this. Usually the stuff that is rendered a hoax is usually something very short, and it's obvious just from the few seconds that they show, and from being even the images being obscured by trees and bushes and shrubbery. We can still tell a lot of times it's something fake, just a guy in a gorilla suit. From the gait, the motion of the creature, the way it walks, the costume itself, a lot of factors. But we don't see that. We don't see a lot of footage that is mystifying people. In fact, we don't see any, really. there's a very, what's the second place good piece of Bigfoot footage out there? I mean, it's very debatable. It's a far cry from whatever people claim to be second place and what the Patterson film actually is. So if it's easy just to fool people.
Yeah, you're getting tons of the casting of the feet, but you're not getting any of the actual film footage.
Exactly. We can make fake footprints all day long. That's not difficult, people. I mean,
right.
Some of these casts, they're interesting, but they don't prove anything. That's very when you have the film in front of you and you can watch it over and over again, especially such a good piece of footage that's been able to be analyzed every decade. We get more and more information about it based on our technology and what we've been able to do with the film. It says a lot for the film. So if it was a fake, it's almost more amazing if it's a fake than if it were the real deal.
I was just going to say that. I agree.
Yeah, it is something that I would honestly be fine if the thing was a fake. In my mind, I wouldn't be so upset that, oh my gosh, one day we find out the absolute truth and it's just undeniable. Let's say somebody in the family comes out and tells everything and has the proof and it's just undeniable truth. I would think this thing is still even more amazing because this is like an illusion that has never been able to be replicated again, and nobody even can tell you how it's done, even if it was just a man in the suit. Why are we seeing muscle movement? What's with the pendulous breasts in this creature? How did this guy create this costume that has blown people's minds for decades? And a lot of these features we're seeing in this creature, too, they didn't really come to light right away, such as the muscle movements and the things we're seeing in the creature, the gait. There's been an exhaustive study done just on the movement of the creature. You know, these things didn't come out till decades later. We started finding more and more about this film, and usually when you put something that's counterfeit under the microscope, what happens is it's revealed to be fake right away. Well, the more we put this film under the microscope, the more it mystifies us.
Right. You think with all the new technology that has developed over the years since 1967, that you would have been able to prove that it was a hoax. With all the magnification and digitizing and the HD and everything else that you would have been able to point out. Okay, this is a hoax. But to me, I don't think they've been able to prove that.
No, in fact, exactly the opposite has happened. It's only gained more steam. It's only gained more people thinking that this thing is real. The more it's something else we've been able to discover about it. Recently Bill Muntz took the shake out of the equation with the stabilization of this film. For years and years and years, I don't know, probably 30 years, we've been watching this film with the shake. Now they've been able to take that out, and it didn't make it look fake. It actually gave us a unique view of the gait and motion that this creature was walking in. That's what gave people the ability to do the gait analysis so well, is because they take this thing without the shake in it, and they can do a computer model and see that this thing is walking in a really peculiar way. And people have tried to replicate the walk. It's been difficult, if not too impossible. I've seen 2 attempts, and one attempt they claimed they did it. And, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. It was close. I don't know, but it was difficult, and both of them were done by people who were very physically fit and very able, flexible to do kind of these sorts of things. So it's a very mysterious film, and as time goes on, it's only gotten more mysterious.
Jeff, I just want to expand on the costume aspect of it. And looking at the film, when I first saw it, I really had not really looked at it. And I sew. And we're thinking back in 1967, I have knowledge of working with fake fur, with fur.
Yeah.
And just when you look at this, and I've read some of the naysayers and some of the questions that they bring up, and one of them had said, well, I keep looking for the zipper. But when you look at the proportions, it would be really difficult to get something to fit that well, not to mention the bending of the knees. Working with fur, it's really hard to get fabric to move like that. So as far as the costume aspect, it just seems really, really impossible, just looking back at that time. So to expand on that, do you find that the costume, can it really be a costume?
Well, I'm glad I'm talking to such an expert in costumery, Lucy. I'm really glad to have somebody who really understands the difficulty of what it would take to do that. Primarily, I think what they had to choose from back then was a material called Dionel, which is a fake fur, or you had the option of going real, maybe a bear hide or something. The gentleman who claimed he was the man in the suit in the past few years, Bob Hieronymus, claimed at one point that Roger Patterson had skun it from a dead horse. Well, I can't think of anything worse than trying to make a Bigfoot costume out of horsehair. That's completely wrong type of hide anyways, but I digress. So amateur costumery back in 1967. You had fake fur, basically, and then you had another potential was he could have modified an existing costume, a gorilla suit, which is another claim. which to me that would almost be harder. And then you're going to sew some breasts on it. Where do how do you make fake breasts? If I brought a gorilla suit and you said, hey, I want some fake breasts on there. Well, what are you going to do with that for me, Lucy? I mean, how are you going to do that? You're a costume maker.
Well, I mean, just to look at it and just to look at the way the hair lays, that's not fake fur, because I remember the Dynel that you're talking about, and it's basically like a stiff fiber. So you can look. I mean, some of the pictures that you have of the ads for costumes back then, there's a definite difference. And when you're looking at this creature walking, for it to be horsehair, this is a much longer hair. It's just really there is a definite. It looks natural. It really does look natural. And like I said, in order to fit somebody, sure, you can. I read a little bit more what you had on there about maybe having the extra long appendages, but the movement. There's movement in here that it would be really, really difficult to sew and to make something that moves that well. And based on watching the film and watching it walk, it just does not fit.
It doesn't add up.
It really doesn't. It
no.
really doesn't.
And consider this coming from a guy who's done most of his life doing rodeo work. I mean, no knowledge of Hollywood-level costumery has ever been attributed to Roger Patterson in any way that I could find. And even when you look at the Hollywood, what was the best Hollywood was doing at that period in time? Well, they did Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. Had some troglodyte-like creatures at the beginning, and we have Planet of the Apes coming out in 68-ish. And those were really the best attempts of gorilla costumery, other than your, gorilla costumes that are supposed to be gorillas at the time. Those are kind of what we're looking at is the top of the line type of costumery that resembles anything like a Bigfoot. Well, those costumes really don't represent or look anything like they could have been based off of what we see in the Patterson film. Nothing existed in a Hollywood costume that could even be modified, I don't think, from that point. So even if this was a costume, that just makes it more mystifying and more amazing to me. I know a lot of people would probably disagree because they want it to be a Bigfoot. However, if you really see the complexity of what we're seeing in that film, and if you knew it was a costume, the mystery doesn't end there. It only begins, just in a different path.
Well, I'm amazed that more people, more costumers haven't really spoke out, other than the few people that are mentioned. So what I would like to know is, could you tell us a little bit more about Philippe Moore's costumes and Bob Hieronymus? I mean, who exactly were they, and what claims do they make that could possibly justify that this is a costume?
Yeah, good questions. Around 2004, Greg Long came out with a book called The Making of Bigfoot, which basically, in a sense, introduced a lot of the world to a man by the name of Bob Hieronymus, who claimed he was the man in the costume in 1967, and by also introduced us to a costume maker who claimed was the manufacturer of that very costume by the name of Philip Morris Costume. He's from the Philip Morris Costume Company. And that's where the whole thing started. Basically, Bob Hieronymus was claiming he was the man in the suit. Roger Patterson was supposed to pay him $1,000 to walk in the suit back in 1967 for a minute, which equates to over $9,000 in today's economy, which is a very, 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 very curious claim, I think, because it almost sounds like something he made up nowadays and then forgot to do the math in his head. In other words, by converting the economy from today's economy back to 1967 money, where you could have got a guy to do it for $25 or probably less. $9,000 basically is what it's like, somebody coming up to you to claim to walk in a gorilla suit for a minute, which is, it's just a curious amount if you really think about it. But nonetheless, let's go with that and say he did do it. Well, the costume guy claimed that Roger Patterson he remembers a transaction from 1967 somehow, and claims that Roger bought the suit and then called him back and asked him any tips on making it more realistic. And then he claimed he saw the film on TV a short while later, and then put two and two together, said, hey, that's my suit. Well, if you look at Philip Morris' costumes, his suits are fine for costume parties and things like that, but it looks nothing like the creature, what we see in the Patterson film. It's also a weird testimony to say that an average person who doesn't do costumery took one of your costumes and then somehow made it better than what you do. You know,
right.
It's like the layman outdoing a master. You know, how does that happen? You know, he makes
right.
a few modifications and it's better. Well, I dare anybody to try to modify anything. Take your computer, something you know nothing about modifying the aesthetics on, and try to modify it and see if it comes out better than what the Macintosh people did. Do that at your own risk, but I don't think it's going to turn out right. If you know what I'm saying. It's not as easily said.
One thing I didn't see, and just to ask you, did anyone ever find any hairs or any anything that possibly could be attributed to the creature, other than the footprints?
Not that particular creature. What we have on there is a record of footprints, and those were actually verified a few days later by a man by the name of Bob Titmus. He came by the site several days later after the event had transpired and independently verified and took prints of the scene himself. And I find it interesting. He didn't say he saw several different tracks or something. Nothing looked fishy to him in the sand, apparently. Whereas if you were doing a stunt or a hoax, I would think that there would be some kind of evidence there at the scene that maybe somebody changing into a costume, you can kind of see something going on, or maybe several tries or takes. But apparently that what he saw in the sand, he saw and took the prints, and he thought it was legitimate, which again goes back to the costumery. These prints, they have feet on them. This costume, if it was a costume, it has feet. Now, were these feet used in the making of the prints, or did you have to somehow go back in the sand, erase what you just did, and put new prints in there somehow? You would almost have to have them done just with all the evidence on the costume. In other words, whatever the costume was would have had to been leaving the prints as well, which adds another dimension to making a costume of that caliber. You'd have to have something that would leave realistic footprints.
Right. So, Jeff, what one thing from this film leads you to believe that this is an absolute truth, that Bigfoot was caught on film?
Well, to be quite honest, I'm not of the camp where I'm 100% sold that it is a Bigfoot on film. I do take a two-pronged approach. However, I think the evidence that this thing is real is an easier explanation, actually, than the costume explanation, that this possibly is a real creature. And I'm not discounting that it's a man in the suit. And I do go into that option in my book, The Great Bigfoot Film Mystery, for people who are on the fence, too. They can look at both aspects of it. But it just seems so much easier to have this really be a Bigfoot than actually making a film where you're trying to make this thing happen and make it look real in a one take. We forget nowadays with the technology of videotape and then the advent of digital technology of cameras that we can do endless takes of whatever we want nowadays. We can do 1,000 takes if you're trying to make some piece of footage look real. Well, back then you couldn't. You had to have this film developed, sent out to a developer. It was very expensive and costly. You couldn't tape over it, nor could you see what you just got on film until days later. So this was done in one take. And keep that in mind. How difficult would that be if you're trying to make a hoax nowadays? I mean, I guarantee you any hoax you see has been done, 30, 40, 50 times. Some of them people just trying to get these things right. And then there's still, people still don't care after they see them because they're not impressed by it. Whereas this was done in one single take.
I mean, it's absolutely amazing when you look at the film itself and you see this thing walking. But another question that comes to mind, the way it's looking back. I mean, it's just like the look. I mean, it turns, it looks, the movements just, to me, from my uneducated view, it just looks so natural. It really does look natural. Now, whether or not, it's very difficult to say. I mean, just the movements.
Yes, the movement is a dead giveaway. A lot of times when you're watching an old gorilla movie, let's say on television, I mean, they might have a decent costume and whatnot, but at the same time, a lot of what's giving it away is, it's an actor in a suit, is the way it moves. And the interesting thing about the Patterson film is there's such a synchronicity between so many things going on in this film. It's not just about having a really good-looking suit, people. It's not just about having a person who can walk funny and do it in a very natural flow and a natural gait. It's not just about it's these things together, and it's also them doing it flawlessly in one take, not tripping over rocks. You're walking around with some giant feet on it, basically like wearing flippers, scuba flippers at the beach or something. I mean, how fluid can a person walk in oversized feet? Prosthetic, weird-looking feet that somebody custom made. There's such a flow to it. You're right. It's very natural looking.
Not to mention not only just the feet, but when you look at the way that it's looking, if this was a mask that was over someone's face, you're not going to be able to see that clearly unless it's like really, really close to your face. And this creature just happens, it's walking and it looks and it just keeps walking and never misses a stride. Never hesitates, and just the flow of the head towards the shoulder and back. I mean, those things I found really, really amazing.
Yeah, and keep in mind, too, this is also the first time we've ever really seen this movement. Nowadays, when you see people trying to fake Bigfoots, or you see a commercial that has Bigfoot, or maybe a movie, they're all doing the Bigfoot walk. That all came from this film. Before that, there wasn't anything really in Hollywood. When you would see an ape-like creature or an ape or whatever, they would all be doing that ape-like movement. This is a lumbering, different sort of style. This, to me, kind of speaks volumes, too, because a lot of times if you're going to do a fake, you wouldn't have this original idea to do this type of a Bigfoot walk. You would think it would be more of an ape-like acting, This is something exclusive to the Patterson film at the time, and did not come from the idea of Hollywood, which people are highly susceptible to things like that, whether they know it or not. So Roger Patterson, if he did, make this up as a hoax, that's another thing he invented in a sense. Is this original way for his actor to walk in?
Well, Jeff, you know what? What I'd like to do is we've mentioned your book, which is titled The Great Bigfoot Film Mystery. Can you tell our listeners what exactly would they find in your book that's different from the other books that's out there on Bigfoot?
Well, it goes into the different aspects. It's not a technical book because that's already been done several times. You can buy 3 or 4 different books and get the measurements and just the facts and things like that. This book is exclusively about the Patterson film, though. A lot of books aren't. They're just talking about Bigfoot in general. I might mention that in passing. So this exclusively deals with the mystery, the crux of the matter of the Patterson film. And it goes into various aspects of it. What would it take to build a Bigfoot like that? If it were a fake, how good would you have to be? Why has this never been able to be performed again? I compare it to the illusion of David Copperfield. He made the Statue of Liberty disappear in the early 80s, and it was fascinating. It was phenomenal. People were talking about it for days, but the thing was, everybody knew it was a trick. And the thing is, too, he could perform that trick, and so could other magicians, or so could anybody, really, if they had the time, money, and the treasure to do so. But it's just like a formula. You do the same things over and over again, you get the same results. Well, the Patterson film is much different. If this were just a man in the suit, how come this attempts to recreate it have not been performed to satisfaction? And I go over the recreations in my book as well, too. There's been several major attempts, some of them high dollar and some of them low budget, that have been attempted to make like creatures, and they've all failed. Why is that? If it were just that easy, why has every major attempt failed miserably?
So, Jeff, have you done any studies on any other Bigfoot sightings or proposed evidence?
I have not done. I've stuck with the Patterson film because it's by far the best and most intriguing piece of footage. I look into everything, yes, in a sense. Have I looked at other Bigfoot things? And yeah, I have, of course, and I've just not been impressed with them. I'm not saying that they're not potentially real, but what I am saying is they're not intriguing enough to devote much more time. A lot of times, too, you see a piece of footage, it's like, well, I can't analyze this thing much more. The Patterson film has the most evidence of any of them, too. Not only do we have a film, but we have testimonies of Roger and Bob, and we have footprints that go along with this film. There's a lot of evidence just with the Patterson film, let alone all the side stories, the red herrings and things like that, but there's just so much to go with the Patterson film, whereas the other one's like, here's a piece of film footage taken on somebody's cell phone. It gets cast into the ash heap of who knows who cares because you try to analyze it a little further, and there's not much you can do with it. And it could be a real Bigfoot.
So based on that, are you planning on writing another book or do a documentary or any type of other film?
Right now, I'm keeping my options open. I had a project I was going to work on Bigfoot, but that fell through. But I'm looking to see. I've got a few ideas, so I'm going to try to keep you posted on that one.
Okay, excellent. Basically, and I guess my last question is: do you have anything coming up new, or is there any new research on the Patterson film?
Well, apart from what Bill Munns has been doing, he's still trying to supposedly work on the equation, trying to figure out the size of this thing. I think only time will tell, because just when you think you've gotten to all the evidence out of this film that's ever going to be said, and we're just done, it seems like something else. It seems like every decade, within a 10-year period, something else pops up. Either it's new technology where you can analyze it further, or new allegations. Maybe such as Greg Long's book, or we get there's always new pieces, whether they're good or bad. I'm listening to them all, so only time will tell, I think, on this film.
Wow. Anthony, do we have any callers for Jeff?
No, we don't have any callers, but we've got actually I've got one question from the chat room, and I have a question. Jeff, have you actually spoken to Bob Giblin? Have you actually sat down with him, interviewed him, or spoke to him in person or over the phone?
Yeah, I've talked to him briefly, and I've done a lot. The thing with Bob Gimlin is he's not changed his story any, and it's one of those things where you hear the same story over and over again. Okay, I get it. So did I get much new information? No, I don't really have a lot of new information because he's not giving any new information. He makes appearances at the conventions once in a while. I think once a year, twice a year. He's still going strong, and he's still keeping true to what his statement is, that this was a real creature as far as he knows. Now, one time he did make a statement. Some people make hay out of this. He said, it was possible that this could have been a hoax without my knowledge. He had made that statement once in an interview a few years back. And a lot of people who are debunkers try to make hay with that by saying, hey, he admitted it could have been a hoax. Well, I don't know. I think it's pretty dangerous if you're the one carrying a rifle and somebody's putting one over on you with a guy in the suit in the distance. That seems like a mighty dangerous combination of events there that might transpire. So.
Yeah, I mean, he would have had to, or you would have hoped he would have been included in on that hoax, because God forbid the person in that costume, we would be hearing another story besides the actual film itself.
Yeah, it would be a unique story all in and of itself in that regard. But yeah, it probably wouldn't have the kind of impact that this has for decades.
Did he ever say why he made that comment? Was there any allusion to what was the background behind that statement?
Yeah, the background behind it was somebody interviewing him and flat on asked him if he thinks it could have been a hoax. So somebody was trying to probe him a little deeper and see if he would give way on his story. And he basically said, hey, it could have been, in theory. Doesn't mean he believed it was. The way he made it sound, it made it just sound as, yeah, theoretically, I suppose. But I don't think he was saying it in the regard that he does think it transpired that way.
Right. I mean, anything is possible. I mean, that's probably what he was alluding to.
That's what he was basically saying.
I have one last question, and it comes from Paranormal from the chat room, and she's asking, how come they never followed the creature?
Well, the film ran out, and according to their testimony from that point on, that's all we have, is they did trail it into the woods to a certain degree, and then they just lost track of it. And a few days later, when Bob Titmus came by to check out the scene and made some plaster casts of the prints, he claimed that he followed the prints into the woods and actually picked up the trail again at some point, because a lot of the trail was lost in the forest floor with the pine straw and whatnot, which makes sense. But he claimed, Bob Titmus claimed, he did find another set of tracks at some point a little further on up that was supposedly from this creature.
Wow.
Well, that's all the questions that we have. I actually want to thank you, Jeff, for coming on. We really appreciate you coming on to our show and talking about the Patterson's film. And I just want to reiterate again, the website that you have is pattersonfilm.com, and your book is titled The Great Bigfoot Film Mystery, which, can they go to your website, or is there any other websites where they can get this book?
Yeah, there's, let's see. Yeah, you can go to pattersonfilm.com, buy it directly through PayPal. It's safe and secure. You could go to, there's a couple other sites that have it. There's an ebook version for you hipsters who like to read on those things. So those things are, I think you get that at Barnes & Noble. There's a Smashwords version for you people who have the Kindle. All kinds of options for you. It's a great book. I hope you enjoy it. It's gotten really good reviews, and I'm glad I wrote it. I almost didn't write it. Here's a little inside story about it. I was supposed to have it done about a year ago. My computer hard drive crashed, lost everything. I had to rewrite it.
Oh, gosh.
All from memory. Yeah.
Wow.
So I did it, though, and I actually think it came out a lot better than the first version. So I think it's a much more refined version. I went a little different direction in it, and I think the results are even better than what I originally had.
Well,
okay, we're glad you actually were able to recreate that book, because it's a great book. Everybody should actually go out and get it, and it's called The Great Bigfoot Film Mystery. And Lucy?
Jeff, I want to thank you so much for coming on and giving us a little insight into your world and the world of Bigfoot. You know, this was a truly amazing discussion, and we would like to invite you to come back on the show in the future.
I would love to be your guest. You guys are great, Anthony and Lucy. May the Lord richly bless you and your listeners. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That was awesome. That was absolutely awesome. That was really good.
That was great. Jeff is a great guy, and like I said before, we've seen a ton of his YouTube videos and interviews, and we've listened to him, and he's just a wealth of knowledge on the Patterson film. And I mean, that's the reason why we wanted to have him on the show. It is the one piece of evidence that has lasted for 40 years and has still been, or is still being debated till this day, and it cannot be, you cannot be convinced either it is a hoax or real, and that to me is amazing in itself. And so to have someone on the show who is an expert in that field, who understands, who has done the research, who has talked with the folks, and getting an insight to, just a little bit of an insight on the show of what he has come out of doing all this research for almost his entire life is amazing. And to have this also in his book, The Great Bigfoot Film Mystery, is just an awesome cherry on the top of that cake.
It certainly is, and you know what? For our listeners out there, you really have to go get this book. If you are into the Bigfoot phenomena, if you are, after you see this film, and just to dive into all aspects of it, you have to get the book. So, thank you again, Jeff. I think it was awesome. Anthony, can we get into the history now of Bigfoot?
Absolutely.
Okay, this is amazing, okay? The earliest so-called reference to something like a quote-unquote Bigfoot is from the Epic of Gilgamesh, and this is one of the earliest surviving pieces of literature from Mesopotamia. It is a story that's written in poem form, and it describes the relationship between Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Enkidu is described as a wild man created by the gods, full of hair that sprouts everywhere on his body. Together, Gilgamesh and Enkidu traveled through the Cedar Mountains to defeat the monstrous guardian. Now, in 500 BC, the historian Herodotus wrote about hairy monsters in Libya, and in the Greek and Roman traditions, there are stories of half-man, half-beast creatures known as satyrs. They were often depicted as having horns and a tail, and were seen undertaking some form of sexual activity. Other types of satyrs were called fauns, sileni, and nymphs. Now, in medieval Europe, the medieval wild men were generally hairy, both with human and animal traits. Often they were covered with hair, except for the face, feet, and hands. But unlike the satyrs of Greek and Roman imaginations, the tail and horns are absent. Now, the first written account of the North American wild man did occur in 1986 AD, when Leif Erikson and his men landed in the New World. Now, this is several centuries before Christopher Columbus, I might add. In Samuel Eliot Morrison's account of the Norse voyages, Erikson mentions creatures that were horribly ugly, hairy, swarthy, and with big black eyes. Peter Byrne, in his book, The Search for Bigfoot, Monster, Myth, or Man, however, says that quote is more probable with the creatures they encountered, that they were simply Indians. Now, Byrne argues that the Norse word skelring, which was used to describe these creatures or people, in actual fact means barbarian, which may well have been used to describe the local Indians, but he is puzzled by the skelring being hairy. The Norse were hairy people themselves, big men with matted hair and beards. So this prompts the question, why did they remark on the skelring being hairy if they were a hairy group themselves, if they were describing the Indians? However, the legend of Bigfoot existed long before the white man arrived in the New World. The coastal Indian tribes of British Columbia, and in particular the Kwakloodles, had carved totem poles and face masks which clearly referenced to a man-beast. Indeed, the face masks were carved into an image of a ferocious-looking creature known as Bukwas, or the wild man of the woods. Now, in examining the Bukwas face mask, Don Hunter, a highly respected Canadian journalist, says that each of the carvings, in its stylized way, suggests a creature that is considerably more human in appearance than it is animal. The Kwakloodles were not the only Native American tribes to have legends involving a hairy wild man. The Hoopa Indians of Northern California tell stories about what they call Oma, the boss of the woods. Now, according to the Hoopa legend, he lives out in the mountains and never comes down to the valleys. Now, to be referred to as the boss of the woods, the creature must have been pretty domineering. The Salish tribes of British Columbia refer to Bigfoot as Sasquatch, meaning wild man of the woods. And there are legends of the stickmen of the Washington Mountains. Indeed, with minor variations in behavior and appearance, the creature, under its many names, plays a major role in Western Indian lore from northern BC to California, and to somewhat a lesser, though similar, role in Native American cultures across the continent. As the early European explorers in the New World made contact with the native tribes, their attitudes and beliefs were recorded in notes and diaries. And it is in these sources of information that we can understand more about the Native American belief in Bigfoot. José Mariano Mocino, in his book Noticia de Nootka, published in Spanish in 1792, wrote, "I do not know what to say about the Maklaks, Sasquatch, inhabitant of the mountainous districts of who all have an unbelievable fear. They imagine his body as very monstrous, all covered with stiff black bristle, a head similar to a human, but one with much greater, sharper, and stronger fangs than those of the bear, extremely long arms and toes, fingers armed with long curved claws. His shouts alone, they say, force those who hear them to the ground, and any unfortunate body he slaps is broken into 1,000 pieces." Now, another early settler, David Thompson, kept a daily journal, and when he crossed the Rockies near the present site of Jasper, Alberta, in the winter of 1811, he came across what nowadays would be perhaps called Bigfoot footprints. He writes, "Continuing our journey in the afternoon, we came on the track of a large animal. The snow about 6 inches deep on the ice. I measured it, 4 large toes of 4 inches in length, to each a short claw. The ball of the foot sunk 3 inches lower than the toes. The hinder part of the foot did not mark well. The length 14 inches by 8 inches in breadth, walking north to south and having passed about 6 hours. We were in no humor to follow him. Its great size was not that of a bear." Now, another explorer, Paul Kane, also appears to make the point that the native Indians appear to be frightened of a race of beings. His entry from March 27, 1847 reads, "When we arrived at the mouth of the Catalpoodle River, 26 miles from Vancouver, Washington, I stopped to make a sketch of the volcano, Mount St. Helens, distant, I suppose, about 30 or 40 miles. This mountain has never been visited either by whites or Indians. The latter assert that it is inhabited by a race of beings of a different species, who are cannibals, and who they hold in great dread. These superstitions are taken from a man, they say, that went into the mountains with another, and escaped the fate of his companion, who was eaten by the skookums, or evil genii. I offered a considerable bribe to any Indian who would accompany me in exploration, but could not find one hardy enough to venture there."
The notion of Bigfoot being a cannibal is not widely accepted, and apart from that entry by Paul Kane that you just read, Lucy, there is no other reference to cannibalism. However, this does not mean that the creature is passive in any way. Mammals have a habit of defending their territory from intruders, and Bigfoot is no exception. A gruesome experience with a giant bipedal animal is related by a former U.S. President, Theodore Roosevelt, an avid big gamer hunter. In his book, The Wilderness Hunter, the events occurred around the mid-1800s and involved the brutal killing of a hunter by a beast, which had left huge footprints. As this is a particularly intriguing case, I'm going to discuss it a little bit further. In the late 1890s, near the Chetco River in southern Oregon, a dozen loggers and their families encountered a great beast with disastrous results. Camping in tents by the river, the lumbermen would awaken each morning to find their freshly cut timber logs, which required 3 men to move, carelessly scattered about like matchsticks. Huge human footprints left in the damp earth were the only clues. Since they had been having trouble with bears, the men followed the footprints through the torn shrubbery and uprooted saplings until they disappeared. That night, the loggers were awakened by a shrill scream of something not quite human in the near underbrush. Seizing a rifle, one man lit a torch and headed into the darkness. He was quickly followed by several other men. In a very short time, the first man rushed back to collapse in terror at the feet of his tracking companions. He babbled incoherently about a hairy monster 8 feet tall with yellow eyes, fangs, and hands like a man. His description put the camper in an uproar. The next night, 2 men decided to track and kill the hairy intruder. They carried a small lantern and loaded rifles and disappeared into the darkness behind the tents. Back in camp, their friends heard screams and shrieks and the sounds of gunfire, then silence. When the 2 men did not reappear, the other loggers grabbed lanterns and torches, and while firing their guns into the air, set out in search of their comrades. A half-mile from camp, they found the scene of a desperate struggle. Broken and bleeding arms and legs ripped from torsos, their 2 friends lay scattered all over the place. They had been slammed against trees and torn into pieces by something with incredible strength. Blood dripped into small pools from the branches high in the trees, as well from the crushed greenery on the surrounding shrubs. But of the hairy creature responsible, there was only bloody footprints leading deep into the woods. The loggers struck camp and left the area the next day. Professional hunters entered the forest in the days that followed, but found no sign of the creature. Skeptics, no doubt, will not be satisfied until they have a body. However, this was almost the case in 1884, when near the city of Yale, British Columbia, a strange creature was captured that some called a young Bigfoot. Jacko, as it became known, was something of a gorilla type, standing at 4 feet 7 inches tall and weighing 127 pounds. While being transported, Jacko mysteriously disappeared and was never heard of again. The arrival of the 20th century ushered in a new wave of Bigfoot encounters. According to the Victorian colonist in 1901, Mark King, one of the best timber cruisers, sort of men who search out good, accessible stands of timber for the logging companies in the province, and who was known as a fine man with an enviable reputation for reliability, was working alone on Vancouver Island as his Indian packers refused to accompany him, fearing what called the monkey men. It was late afternoon when King sighted the man-beast. It was bending over a pool washing some roots. On seeing or hearing King, it gave a startling cry and ran swiftly up the hillside. King described the creature as covered with reddish-brown hair, and his arms were peculiarly long and were used freely in climbing and in brush running, while the trail showed distinct human foot, but with phenomenally long and spreading toes. A dramatic event was reported in 1907 when the captain of the steamship Capilano, sailing upon British Columbia coast, suddenly found himself being hailed by a canoe load of Indians, frantic to get away from their small community of Bishop's Cove. They had been scared away by a monkey-like wild man who appears on the beach at night, who howls in the unearthly fashion between intervals of exertion at clam digging. It seems a rather funny image, that of a frightening beast howling as it digs for clams. Nevertheless, the Indians did desert their village. In 1924, saw 2 of the most famous Bigfoot encounters. The first involved the astonishing story of Albert Ostman, who claimed he was kidnapped by a Sasquatch and held captive for a week. This story would no doubt have been ignored as the fanciful whims of a crazy man, but everyone who has met Ostman are impressed by his sincerity and his descriptions of the Sasquatch. And this is in an age when there was no widespread information available, have been confirmed by subsequent sightings. The second case is far more violent and involves the story of 4 miners attacked in their log cabin by several ape-like creatures in an area of Washington State called Ape Canyon. Once again, their story checks out, and witnesses who saw the men after their ordeal were absolutely certain that they were in such an emotional state that something pretty scary must have happened to them. One must bear in mind that these were tough, rugged, seasoned miners who were not disposed to show any emotions, particularly that of fear.
Well, subsequent decades saw many encounters and newspaper reports of sightings and footprint evidence, but as per usual, they were regarded by most people as pranks and hoaxes and an overeager imagination. May 1950 saw the disappearance of experienced mountaineer and expert skier Jim Carter in Ape Canyon. He was part of a 20-strong climbing party from Seattle, and search parties combed the area for weeks and found nothing. His tracks in the snow showed that he was running at a great speed, as if to evade capture, and even jumped over great crevices. Several members of the party did not comment that they felt that they were being watched by something, or somebody, and could feel the hair on the back of their necks stand up. As to what happened to him, 2 members of the climbing party, Bob Lee, a well-known mountaineer, and the 1961 Himalayan expedition leader, and Dr. Otto, the surgeon for the Seattle Mountain Rescue, concluded the apes got him. Another significant sighting in the annals of Bigfoot lore occurred in 1955 when William Rowe sighted a female Bigfoot near the town of Tetejan Kach, British Columbia. This case is significant because the level of detail that the witness is able to remember about the creature. William Rowe was so confident in the truthfulness of his story that he even signed a sworn affidavit in front of a commissioner for oaths. However, it wasn't until the remote Bluff Creek area of Northern California was opened up for logging in the 1950s that Bigfoot really entered the mainstream culture. The loggers would turn up on site each morning and discovered that the equipment had been disturbed, and indeed, 50-gallon fuel drums tossed around as if they were empty. About 20 miles of road had been built when the big tracks started to appear. They were made at night at intervals of about a week. Their basic route was across the road to get to the hillside to the creek bed, but sometimes they went for a short distance along the road and even circled the park machines. The tracks were all made by the same individual and were roughly 16 inches long and 8 inches wide. These footprints impressed almost an inch into the ground, whereas the logger's boots barely made an impression on the surface. Logging foreman Jerry Crew said, "I've seen hundreds of these footprints in the past few weeks. Every morning we find his footprints in the fresh earth we've moved from the day before." Jerry Crew made a plaster cast of one of these footprints and took it to the local newspaper. The newspaper editor commented on it being a big foot and ran the story with the word Bigfoot used for the first time. The resulting news story was picked up by the Associated Press wire, and Bigfoot was famous. The mystery took another twist when 9 years later in Bluff Creek, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin captured what they claimed was a female Bigfoot. The film, known as the Patterson film, is without exception the most controversial piece of Bigfoot evidence ever recorded. Entire books have been written about it, and many hours have been spent analyzing the 952 frames of color film, and yet, even to this day, no one has managed to prove that the film is a hoax. We're going to discuss this more in depth in a little while. The Patterson film is in effect the dividing line between the historical Sasquatch and the modern-era Bigfoot, and the mystery would never be the same again. Bigfoot in the 1970s was hijacked by the media and soon became a minor television and film star. He even fought the $6 Million Man and was used in countless TV commercials. Unfortunately, this also brought with it the usual crackpots. Their stories in the tabloid press further reinforced belief amongst the most people that the Bigfoot mystery was just a silly hoax. "I was raped by the abominable snowman" was typical of the headlines. And with the fame came the hoaxers, who no doubt modified the waters as far as the serious researchers were concerned. This then was how the Bigfoot phenomena remained most in people's minds, an implausible hodgepodge of myth, silly stories, and ultimately hoaxes. The mystery, therefore, did not deserve to be taken seriously. Serious researchers, however, knew the phenomenon as having deep history, stretching back as far as the arrival of the white man in North America, and indeed rooted not only in myth and legend, but possibly in reality.
When doing this research, Lucy, did you think the history of Bigfoot went as far back as 500 BC and actually even earlier?
You know, when we started to research this, I first started to report the recordings from the 1800s, and then when we found the information in some archives that discussed Bigfoot further back in history, I was amazed. I mean, we can't, and we won't know for sure, in fact, if the early Mesopotamian writings were in fact describing what we know today as Bigfoot.
Yeah, I mean that was a great find, but the information about the early American settlers from 986 AD and I think you had mentioned the Norse voyagers describing what they saw and encountered when they landed in America, to me was pretty amazing, and it made a good point about how they would describe these, quote, creatures as hairy when researchers say that they are describing the early Native Americans. But the Norsemen were hairy themselves, pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. I wish we could spend more time on the history, but since this is only a 2-hour show, I think we should get to all the research we found.
Yeah, I know. There is so much on this topic and so little time. Well, we spoke to Jeff earlier about the Patterson film, which has been the most popular and most significant piece of possible Bigfoot evidence for a very long time. Well, maybe up until now. There was a photo that was taken in 2007 by a gentleman named Rick Jacobs. Rick Jacobs was a deer hunter from Pennsylvania, and he set out on September 16, 2007, to monitor the deer in a particular area of northern Pennsylvania. He set up a Bushnell trail camera with infrared lights. The infrared light's main purpose, if you're a paranormal investigator, you know this, is to allow you to capture light in pure darkness without any visible flash. Deer hunters do this so that they don't scare the deer or the surrounding animals. And Rick attached the camera to the side of a tree and left the area for the night. In the morning, Rick took down the camera and reviewed the photographs. What he found amazed himself and many scientists and laymen, almost stirring up another Patterson film controversy. The area in the foreground was baited with deer attractant mix and a mineral lick block. The mineral lick block can be seen sitting on a large black plastic plate. The photos start with natural bears in the area. One of the bear cubs is apparently licking or sniffing the mineral block. And he has pictures of this, by the way. And we actually have these pictures on our Facebook page, Paranormal Review Radio. You can see a couple of those on there. But even if you just Googled Rick Jacobs photos, you'll see them. So the photos start with the natural bears in the area. In the two subsequent images, the black plate is turned over and leaning against the mineral block. Several minutes elapsed between the image of the bear cubs and the images showing the ape-like animal. The next image shows the ape-like animal from a rear side angle, with its head obscured by its shoulders. In the third image, the ape-like animal appears to be smelling the ground near where the deer attractant mix had been scattered. Various anatomical elements can be seen upon careful examination of the images, including sort of a bare nude spot in the fur under the arm. The Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, or the BFRO, has done extensive research on these photographs and concludes the following. The question was asked, how do we know this is a Sasquatch or Bigfoot and not a bear in these pictures? Here's what they said. The distinction between ape anatomy and bear anatomy is most visible in one of the photos. The figure has its face pressed against the ground to smell some aromatic deer attractant mix, which the Jacobs brothers said that they sprinkled at the spot in order to get a centered photo of a deer. Aside from the obvious limb ratio issues, when a bear bends down to sniff the ground, it should look more or less like a large dog sniffing the ground. If you have a large dog, then you'll know intuitively that a dog does not get in this position to sniff the ground or even to press its ears against the ground. Neither does a bear, no matter how mangy it is. Apes, however, do get in this exact posture to smell the ground. By the way, a mangy bear is simply a sickly, skinny, or poor-skinned bear. Various newspapers reported that the creature is a mangy bear. This assertion originated from the spokesperson from the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Several people who have spent a great deal of time with both primates and bears, mainly zoo veterinarians, have consistently told us right off the bat that it looks much more like a primate than a bear. And therefore, even though we do not have the corpse of the animal to dissect, we say with confidence that the Jacobs creature is not a bear. Honestly, I have reviewed the photos and read the articles, and I have to say that, first off, it is much better quality picture than that of the Patterson film. I mean, understandably, Patterson film was done in 1967. These pictures were done in 2007. even though the Jacobs photos are just the photos and not film, it does show a better quality image of the ape-like creature and seems to be something that can be analyzed in more detail than the Patterson film Bigfoot. On the other hand, it is just a photo, and you really can't analyze the movement of the creature to check its authenticity or compare it against how a bear moves. But overall, in my opinion, I think this may be something that is not a bear. Whether it's Bigfoot is still up for discussion, but from my research and review and my non-expert opinion, this definitely is not a bear. Lucy, what do you think of this?
You know, I've seen those photos before, and when I first saw it, it did look to me like a primate of some sort. It's chimp-like, but as I studied it more, the arms and legs look too long, even longer than a primate. It doesn't look like a man in a suit to me, and it definitely looks non-human. Now, it's hard to tell from the position how tall it is. I would assume that if it stood upright, it would be easier to see the abnormally long extremities. It does look young to me, and I would assume that there's more nearby. It does look like it's foraging for food. So when I look at the fur, it doesn't look like a costume. To me, this creature does not look fake. Now, is it a Bigfoot? I'd have to say no. Is it a man in a costume? I'm going to say no to that too. I still think it looks like a primate.
Well, here's an audio clip of a local news station that reported on these photos a few weeks after it was turned into the public eye. It's always interesting to hear what local newscasters have to say about paranormal topics. So here is the actual newscast that was recorded a few days after Rick Jacobs had come to the public with these photos.
In Elk County, 3 pictures have sparked some national attention. That's because those images on the pictures have raised more than a few eyebrows.
WTAJ 10 News reporter Andrew Capasso went to Johnsonburg today. He's live in Du Bois now with more on these pictures. Andrew.
Well, good evening, John. Those pictures have sparked national attention from various news outlets, and the majority of people in Johnsonburg say rightfully so.
I think it looks like an ape.
The pictures were taken by Rick Jacobs of Johnsonburg last month. He had placed a small motion-sensing camera on a tree along a trail in a forest so he could film any deer that might be using that trail. He did this to get ready for the fall deer hunt. In those pictures came these images that leave some in Johnsonburg wondering what exactly is in it. Some think whatever it is was deliberately put there.
I think they're possibly a hoax. At least in one picture, it looks like a stump to me.
Well, it kind of looks like it might be somebody in a costume that's dressed up to be that.
But other people in downtown Johnsonburg say not so fast.
I think it's real. I think it's Sasquatch. It's too long to be a bear. You know, the arms and legs are too long. It's more ape-like.
To me, it looks like a Bigfoot because I used to hunt and I know what a bear looks like, and that's not a bear, I'll tell you right now.
Jacobs forwarded the pictures to the National Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. They've been tracking sightings for years. They say the pictures are being researched to see what's exactly in them. But until they know for sure, one woman in Johnsonburg says she's being a little more cautious.
So you don't think it's a hoax?
No, I don't think it is, but I wonder where it's at.
Now, we did try talking with Jacobs today. His relatives tell me he's been overwhelmed by requests for interviews, and even he's not sure what the pictures are of. Now, the Bigfoot Field Research Organization says they've informally named whatever this thing is, Jacobs' creature. Live in Du Bois, I'm Andrew Capasso, WTAJ 10 News.
Okay, he's out on the trail.
What do you think?
Andrew will follow that. I couldn't tell on video.
I think it's Bigfoot. I'm coming out right now.
Oh, boy. Okay, we'll keep you posted.
Wow. You know, Anthony, let's get into the pop culture of Bigfoot, okay? Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, is an alleged ape-like creature that's purportedly inhabiting forests, mainly in the Pacific Northwest region of North America. It has a demonstrable impact on popular culture phenomena. It has become entrenched in American popular culture and is as viable an icon as Michael Jordan, with more than 45 years having passed since the first reported sightings in California. Neither an animal nor a satisfying explanation as to why folks see giant hairy men that don't exist or do exist. Let's talk about tourism. There are annual Bigfoot-related conventions, and the creature plays a role in Pacific Northwest tourism, such as the annual Sasquatch Days, held for several years in Harrison Hot Springs, British Columbia. Primatologist and Bigfoot researcher John Napier commented on this, stating that Bigfoot in some quarters of North America has become big business. It can no longer be considered simply as a natural phenomena that can be studied with techniques of a naturalist. The entrepreneurs have moved in, and folklore has become fake lore. Research. Now, there are several organizations dedicated to the research and investigation of Bigfoot sightings in the United States. The oldest and largest is the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, or BRFO, considered to be the leader in the field. Now, the BRFO also provides a free database for other organizations or individuals that are interested. Their internet website includes reports from across North America that have actually been investigated by researchers to determine the credibility. Advertising. Now, the words Bigfoot and Sasquatch are widely understood and have been used in advertising, being applied to many products and services such as pizzas, beef jerky, skateboards, skis, an internet search engine, a computer hard drive series, gas stations, Kokanee beer, Bigfoot Shadows award-winning wine, and a monster truck. Jack Link's brand of beef jerky has produced a series of commercials entitled Messin' with Sasquatch. In the commercials, hikers play tricks on Sasquatch. The end of the commercials usually show Sasquatch reacting angrily to the pranks, chasing and sometimes picking up the hikers and throwing them in the air. Now, although they weren't necessarily Sasquatch believers, the game camera manufacturers of the Bushnell Corporation, along with Field and Stream, believe that if anyone's going to catch a Sasquatch on film, hunters using trail cameras is the best possibility. So they launched a promotional contest over a photo taken in September 2007, the Jacobs photo of Pennsylvania, on his Bushnell game camera of what some believe could be a young Sasquatch. Now, more skeptical viewers deemed it as a bear, but as we mentioned earlier, either way, it created much controversy across the Internet, so that because of all the interest surrounding Rick's photos, they offered a $1 million reward for a verifiable photo of Bigfoot taken on a game camera. The food chain Red Robin, that specializes in gourmet burgers, ran a memorable television commercial featuring Bigfoot. The ad followed a hiker that uttered the word Red Robin and heard the reply of "Yum" from Bigfoot. In literature, many have written on the subject, demonstrating a broad spectrum of approaches from a small body of serious scholarly work to lurid tabloids, such as the Weekly World use. Films. There have been over 30 pieces of film that have been produced and viewed in the last 40 years, and just a couple of them. There's The Legend of Body Creek, The Curse of Bigfoot, Harry and the Hendersons, Little Bigfoot, Sasquatch Hunters, Monsters Incorporated, who could forget the Sasquatch Gang, and The Legend of Grassman. In sports, Quachi, one of 3 mascots from the 2010 Winter Olympics in Vancouver, is portrayed as a young Sasquatch who comes from the mysterious forests of Canada. Squatch was the mascot of the basketball team, the Seattle Supersonics. And Bigfoot is the name of the first series of monster trucks. In 1975, Bob Chandler created the original truck, which he named after his driving style rather than its characteristically large tires. Games. Finally, the adventure game Sam and Max Hit the Road involves a search for Sasquatch that escaped a traveling show. Tony Hawk's Underground 2 actually has a Bigfoot character that you can unlock. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Bigfoot appears to be a myth in the game. And finally, in Red Dead Redemption, Undead Nightmare Bigfoot actually makes an appearance. Anthony, I think that's all we have on Bigfoot. So,
that's it. Lucy, I thought we were going to have time for the news, but actually we can get to it. So why don't you go with your story?
Okay. My story tonight in the news is 400-year-old witchcraft trial resumes. And this is from unexplainedmysteries.com. It was posted on Valentine's Day, and it is the case of Katerina Henno, who was burned at the stake in 1627. This has actually been reopened this week. She was originally accused of practicing black magic. Katerina was arrested, she was tortured, and paraded through the streets of Cologne before being tied to a stake and set on fire. Now, between the 14th and 19th century, over 25,000 people in Germany alone were thought to have suffered a similar fate. Katerina's case is being reopened mainly due to the efforts of the evangelical pastor Hartmut Helger, who has taken upon himself to champion her cause and clear her name. Katerina suffered her fiery fate in Cologne in 1627 after she was found guilty of practicing black magic. She was arrested, she was tortured to such an extent that the right-handed woman had to scrawl her last letter of defense with her left hand. And eventually she was paraded through the city in an open cart before being tied to a stake and burnt.
My story is actually was just in the news this week, and I've seen it all over the internet, and it is titled Iceland River Monster Mystery Solved. This was dated February 13th, and this comes from doubtfulnews.com. And this story about the river monster went everywhere. It was a very weird-looking thing, not quite lifelike, but strange. And what was it? Well, now we have a good answer. A Scandinavian skeptical investigator did some video sleuthing and found what seems to be the smoking gun evidence that this river monster is nothing of the sort. Misa McCown had heard about the creature and looked into it. This behavior is completely consistent with an ice-caked fishing net or piece of cloth caught on an underwater branch or rock, and completely inconsistent with a living animal. With this new information, it seems most likely that the video was not a hoax after all. Kyrgyz happened to notice a natural, inanimate object in the water and decided to videotape it. Other people later called it a mysterious creature, elevating an interesting but natural phenomenon to a monster of Icelandic legend. Okay, so here is where we promote and highlight fellow paranormal investigators from around the world. I've mentioned before, we've already mentioned groups from the West Coast, East Coast, and from Canada, so why hasn't your group been mentioned on our show? What are you waiting for? Just send us an email at paranormalreviewradio@yahoo.com with my promo in the subject line. Be sure to include your group's name, all the names of your members, and any interesting facts about your group or any of your investigations. We love giving back to the paranormal community and hope this helps get your group and your mission out in the public for everyone to notice. So we have one group to promote tonight, and they are 11th Hour Paranormal. I received an email from Chad Stambaugh, and he is the co-founder of 11th Hour Paranormal. Their website is 11thhourparanormal.com. The 11th Hour team members are Chad Stambaugh, Chrissy Campbell, the other co-founder, and Sam and Dolores Stairs. They are located in Fresno, California area and are always looking to help people out with their paranormal problems. Their website is still in progress, so they don't have any evidence on the site yet, but are working on it, so keep checking back for updates. Chad is also a California State Director for United Paranormal International. It's a website that tries to give paranormal teams throughout the world a place to learn and share from each other. The website there is www.unitedparanormalinternational.ning.com. Check out some of the articles that Chad has written. I like groups that not only get involved in the paranormal, but also give back to others and the community like we're trying to do. So A+ to 11th Hour Paranormal. Keep up the good work, and don't forget us little guys when you guys make it big. So that's it for the groups. And I did make a promise, Lucy, to everyone today. I made a little announcement or a little teaser this morning on our Facebook page, and we thought, okay, not only giving the paranormal groups and investigators and their teams some sort of shout-out and some promotion for them, we thought what a great idea would be to sort of do a Fan of the Week. So Lucy and I decided to go ahead with this, and we have picked a Fan of the Week. And I think we're going to do this going forward every week because we have such loyal fans out there. You know, I see Nicole there all the time and Tara there all the time. And so we want to give back to you guys and give you guys a shout-out as well. So tonight's, or this week's, Fan of the Week is Jamie Marie Ortega. I'm not sure if you're in the chat tonight, Jamie, but we want to salute you for you were actually the one who we started with. You were one of our first callers on the show last year, and we've noticed that you follow us along all the time. You post our show all the time, and we just love your dedication. Lucy, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Jamie is just cool. She's a paranormal investigator. Personally, we've met her at the Stanley Hotel, and you know what? She's just simply awesome. She's probably one of the nicest people you can ever meet. You know what? Go to her Facebook page. She has a page on Facebook. Say hello. You know, give her some congrats. And Jamie, we love you.
And so, Lucy and I also thought we're probably going to send you something in the mail, hopefully very soon, you know, just a little thanks to us. So, you know, we'll talk to you sort of off the air and get your information, and we just want to give back to you as well. So that's it tonight, everyone. I want to thank Jeff Hilling for coming on our show and sharing his research and thoughts on Bigfoot and the Patterson film. That was an amazing interview, Lucy, that we did, and I hope it actually sparked some interest in our listeners tonight. And like we've always said, we don't come on the air and profess our opinions or our theories. We just lay everything out there on the line for you guys to make up your own decision and make up your own ideas and theories and opinions and chat with us on that. And that's what we love to do. And so for information on Jeff and his research, check out his website at pattersonfilm.com. And like we mentioned before, also pick up his book, The Great Bigfoot Film Mystery, available at Jeff's website. And I believe he mentioned it was also on Barnes & Noble's as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would like to thank you, Anthony, for another fantastic show. You do so much to make this show happen. You are amazing. I also want to say thank you to all of our listeners. You know, we really appreciate your loyalty and support. This is your show. Please let us know what you want to hear. Stop by the show page on Facebook. Leave us your comments, questions. Just say hi. I do want to invite you guys, make sure you join us next week. This is going to be a special show for us because we're both going to be live from Chicago next week. Now, will I survive this show? Am I going to survive this show? You're going to have to tune in and find out. We're going to be reviewing exorcisms and possessions, so you really don't want to miss the show. On that note, everybody have a paranormal week. Good night.
Good night, guys.